and then you'll be ready, gain merit, serve, then you'll be ready for some of this calm abiding. So when I look at my own experience, then I look at people, say Bill and Dora, or many of you came in a different way, kind of first towards Shine or whatever. I asked my teacher about it one time, not just that particular thing, but all the ways we come in, and she said it's just karmic, in past lives you've probably, if you come to the Dharma, you've practiced something, and you kind of come in wherever you come in. We're not blank slates, all coming in and going, now do Shine, or now gain merit, or now do this. So I just shared that because there's so many doors in, 84,000 teachings, for the many, many, many kinds of mind. And you come in through whatever door you come in through. I came in through the door of the word Tonglen. I was a very, very active lawyer, overwhelmed with work and heartbreaking kind of work, and saw a flyer for this thing called Tonglen with Lama Michael, but the word was what grabbed me. What is that word? And I set it on the far corner of my desk for months. And I would do all my lawyer stuff and go, I wonder what that is. And then it had a little paragraph about bodhicitta and compassion, and I thought, man, I'm so burned out. And I ended up going to a Tonglen retreat. That was my first retreat. I had no idea what I was doing, really. The I. But, of course, the Dharma was functioning, So, and many people have those kind of stories, like what was the hook, So you come in and then you do just what Bill said. Watch your mind, see how it's going, Try some stuff. But don't make up your own path. That's the part about meeting with someone or getting the guidance from a teacher. Yeah. To see, am I making it up myself here and putting, a bunch of stuff together, a smorgasbord, and going, wow, I got it down better than the Buddha ever thought. You know what I'm saying? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I remember in the early days in Northwest Dharma News, there was
that was where I got the announcement.
there was they didn't really have any editorial control, and so there was somebody who wrote an article about how he had discovered the fifth noble truth.
Cool.
And it was, I don't remember. I mean, if it had made any sense, I might have left an impression of some kind, but I just whoa.
Yeah,
So.
there you go.
Well, how would you say someone should decide whether to do something like Chenrezig practice? Is that a trial? And in some ways, it seems like it's trial and error. It's try it and see if you relate to that kind of practice, because it's not that it's not a complete other kind of practice, because it also does help your Shine if you do it properly. And so for some people that could be something that they would like to do. For other people, we encourage people to wait until it makes some kind of sense until it seems to be.
I guess part of the reason I ask is, just my instinct is to, maybe it's not the correct instinct, my instinct would be to think that, well, you wouldn't just come right to the Dhamma and start something like Mahamudra right off the bat. I don't know. That's just like my thought.
Well, if you could, there's no problem. The problem is that I would say, oh, I'm doing Mahamudra. But I would just be saying I was doing something. So again, that's also karmic too. You might wind up with there's some teachers that will teach certain things kind of just right there. They won't even say, I'm going to teach Mahamudra or Dzogchen, but the instruction they just gave, that's what it was. And if you got it, then you got it. Then everybody else in the room is going, I wonder when they're going to teach something I can relate to.
You know, after I did a few retreats with Lama Michael and Tonglen, etc., I bumped into Venerable Thupten Chidren, who your teacher, and I just did whatever she was doing. And I remember she was like, okay, now we're going to do Vajrasattva. I didn't have an idea what Vajrasattva is. What's a Vajrasattva? You know? And we're there for New Year's Vajrasattva at Cloud Mountain. I just went because I was so connected with her. And you know, I was sitting there doing this 100-syllable mantra thing. I had no faith in it whatsoever. I thought it was just practically bizarre, you know, and trying to picture some white deity floating around and pouring down light on us. And I'm just sitting there going, this is just nuts, you know? I mean, I don't believe in this. For sure this isn't going to work. But it was just like I couldn't somehow sort of pull away from her. You know, there was some karmic thing. And what I learned to do was to trust the things. This goes to Dora's question. Trust the things where my eye wasn't leading so much, my Western planning mind. You know, now I will move from calm abiding to Vipassana when I see the following 4 signs. And, you know, that's a very conceptual, logical approach. And what I started, not to give that up totally, because, you know, I mean, we're not going to go woo-woo, you know, throw up the strings in the air and see where they fall or something, no. But not to give that up totally, but to appreciate the times where there's some sort of, and I know some of you have, I'm sure some of you have experienced this in Dharma, it's some sort of feeling like I'm being led there. Do people have, yeah, there's a bunch of you nodding. I'm being led, not I made this plan and I'm completing it. You see the difference? So I just think practice gets you to that more open space. And in the meantime, yeah, try stuff. You know, I've tried a lot of stuff that I haven't continued with. Like, well, that one just didn't, you know. But you got to try hard. You know, not just like, I took one bite and I'm never eating that again. But mostly for me, it was watch the teacher. Do I like what that teacher's doing? Do I see their results in the world? Does it end suffering? Then I say, what'd you do to get like that? And they say, do this. You go, really? Then you try it out. You know, make sense? Yeah. But they also say, you know, there's no one quick thing in the Dharma. They also say some students come in through the guru so that my connection was big. And I didn't even understand the connection, but there it was. Some come in through the love of the Dharma. You know, I don't even need a teacher. I just love the teachings, you know, and the practices. Some through the Sangha, like I'm really connected with this group, you know, so you can see, you know. There's just so many ways in. You just really have to, what did you say, to lead this, you really have to take your own kind of Buddha nature seriously, your own Dharma seriously. Honor it, respect it. Yeah.
Yes. lot easier just to say what I've done. But one question I had, when you said after doing shine, you mean like you do a session of calm abiding and then?
Yeah, like I usually start with shine just to kind of
Mm-hmm.
get grounded, and because after shine, kind of everything else is like much more fruitful in my experience.
Mm.
So that's kind of
What's the everything else?
well. I could do like tonglen
Mm.
or read like Dharma. I don't have too many practices that I do like normally,
Mm-hmm.
so maybe just I was kind of thinking of some additional practices to kind of
Mm.
think about.
That's a dangerous question. You might find yourself doing 100,000 prostrations.
Yeah.
Get in touch with me after I come back from Australia and we'll get started then. Yeah. That was the only game in town when we started, really. The Tibetans just assumed, well, you're interested in the Dharma, start Londo, start the foundational practices. How do you do that? Oh, you get this clear spot, and you start doing prostrations and reciting the refuge prayer. Call me when you're done with 108,000. And then there's another 108,000 of something else,
the next
right?
thing,
And
and
then
the
another
next
one,
thing.
and the next one. So, no, it's actually good not to have too many practices, to let that kind of grow. And I think generally speaking, it's good to have practices that uh, assist us along in kind of on the wisdom side, the ultimate bodhicitta side. We'll just use the two bodhicittas. So something that helps us cultivate the calm abiding and leads towards insight. It's good to have something, make sure there's a component in there, and also a component that really helps us cultivate the relative bodhicitta, the loving kindness and compassion, the engagement with others and with situations that allows us to cultivate some kind of relationship there, deepen that. And so that could be just calm abiding and some insight practice on one side, and the four immeasurables. That could be it. Or tonglen. Could be Chenrezig practice, that by itself, because that encompasses both relative and ultimate bodhicitta. So it could be quite simple, and it's actually good to have the um, the compass that points in direction of simplicity, sort of to see where the kind of what the fundamental thing is, and to not feel like, oh, the Dharma grass must be greener on the Tara side of the fence because she's green, or any place else. Not to feel like, oh, because there's so much else, I must be missing something.
Yeah.
That's actually, I think, really important. And if we can have the sense that, oh, actually, no, I'm working on my relative bodhicitta. I'm working on the ultimate side. I'm laying the foundations here. Good. You know, it's like, don't get stressed about it. Feel good about that. But it can be that, we come across something, just like you came across the word tonglen.
Yeah.
Our friend Ben, now in Hong Kong, he was walking down the street in Vancouver, and he saw a poster with a picture of Kala Rinpoche, and that turned his whole life upside down. Just, okay, then that's, like you say, the guru's the door. So it can be like that. You do a practice, and something comes up, and you go, wow, all right, let's pursue that. But feeling some sense of confidence, and like, no, I think I've got the bases kind of covered here. This is good. Welcome.
You know, we all kind of laugh at the 100,000 and then undrawn stuff. The thing it does is to do the 100,000 of anything, you push up against all your patterns, you know. That's what I think it's designed to do. You're bored, you keep going. You're frustrated, you keep going. You're tired, you keep going. You're elated, you keep going. You know, you just and it builds confidence. It really does. There's something quite amazing about it. Like, wow, I did that. You know, I thought when I started, I can't do this. But the teacher thinks you can do it. And so they're like, no, you can do this. You can. You can find a way to do this. And there's something about that building confidence that's really important. You know, doesn't mean you all have to go out and do it, but I would say don't just kind of go, Monroe, that's so crazy. Because, you know, it's got a lot of wisdom to it. And it does help the body settle down too, like for us restless ones, you know. The other thing I really like to do, you know, is I really like to do this practice that I try to remember, and now it's almost a habit you don't have to remember, which is every morning as soon as I wake up, set my intention for the day inside the Dharma. Like, I'm not even out of bed, but just coming out of a dream, and then I go, oh, today I don't want to harm anyone. I want to use my body, speech, and mind to help beings. That's how fast it is. And I take refuge. Then I get up and do more practices, but just to do it right away, and then at the end of the day, just 2-3 minutes before I fall asleep, how'd I do today? You know, this is what I feel really good about. That way I, you know, stopped that argument within myself, didn't keep arguing, or I did this. You know, what would I like to do a little better? Oh, yeah, I think I sort of dropped the ball there. Not beating myself up, but just, you know, like to improve on that. Then you just build your confidence in your own practice, in your own motivation throughout the day and the night, really.
You build an intimacy with it.
What's that?
An intimacy with your own practice.
Yeah. Yeah. It sets a framework.
where's the actual question?
What's up with that?
What's up with that?
I don't know, it just seems like your dreams could, things that come to you in your dreams could also be indicative of maybe where you are in practice or things like that. So I just wondered if Tibetans or people like put much weight in that at all as far as just information, things that you might sign or things that you.
Okay. As far as the Tibetans, the answer is yes and no. Literally. Kalu Rinpoche was, Mama Tinley said he'd always say, people would come and say, "Oh, Rinpoche, I had this dream last night." Don't worry about it. But then every once in a while I say, "Oh, that's an important dream." But we tend to make a little bit of a special case out of dreams, but they're not so special in many regards. Though every once in a while something does come up. But I don't think that, I certainly don't have the qualities to say, "Oh, that was an important dream," and then to be able to say what was important about it or what to do with it.
Sounds like it might have been an inspiring experience anyway.
Yeah. But it's quite true. I mean, what you answered your own question in a certain way. If we permeate our life with something, it shows up in our life, all 24 hours of it. The question of dream yoga is that's a different question. That's really very different thing.
See, I told you it was a silly question.
No, it isn't a silly question. So,
in this discussion tonight, you've said a few times, you collectively both, try things and don't make your own path. And I'm feeling the tension
use the name, but I've actually I've thrown away the practice, but I'm still going to use the name. It would be easier if you had actual examples, because in the abstract, it's again, I'll just say, well, the answer is yes or no. But in terms of looking for and how would one would go about kind of checking? That's an interesting question. The farther along that you go, I think the more it becomes clear when things are actually opening up. And that, I think, is if it's actually leading to a deeper sense of connection with others, a deeper sense of appreciation for the experience of others, that on one side I think is a reasonable yardstick to hold in general. And the other is if it becomes more subtle on the side of insight. It's a little more subtle, but the more you go into that, the more there's some sense that actually I am meeting my experience in a way that's unmediated by my preferences and ideas. I'm actually just directly meeting my experience in a fresh and direct way. So I think the easiest place to wind up kind of wandering around in the weeds is when we're developing understandings about the practice, which appeal to our aesthetic sense of having an understanding. And the understanding is this really cool story. And my name is Bill. I tell myself stories all the time about the Dharma. I really enjoy them. I think they're pretty cool. But in that's actually the place where we can really go off and around. Well, I did this practice, and then that made me think about this, and I did this other practice, and that made me think about that. And then when I think about these two things together, then I think about something else, and then I want to. What's that?
Then I have the fifth noble truth.
Yes, I have the fifth noble truth.
And my workshop will only cost you $100.
Or I have the fifth and the noble truth. I have the fifth.
Yeah, right.
And the noble
because
truth.
It's all pure now.
It's all pure now. Yeah.
Yeah, all of that.
So I don't know, but that's actually those are good things to talk to. If you really have something specific in mind, then that's something to talk over, and then that's I think that's an important thing, because some of the we were talking about this morning. Somebody was saying, well, all these stories come to my mind, but I started to realize where they're probably not all really true. And some of the most convincing ones are probably the least true of all. And part of the response was, well, there's some stories that are actually helpful, and other stories that are really cause us a lot of trouble. And then there's this large zone of stories that actually just take up a lot of time. They're kind of neutral in certain respects, but not so neutral in terms of we've actually used up a lot of space. So there are some things that we can actually, if we're diligent, we're careful, there are understandings that can be fresh, and perhaps nobody else has articulated them in the way that we've just articulated to themselves. But they could be helpful, or they might not be. So it's actually worth. This is part of the thing that I find very valuable about our dialogue here is that we do actually have a chance to articulate things, and people feel free to, put up their hand and say, well, I just like Mary did this
Yeah.
morning. She said, I had this experience on this retreat. Like, let's talk about it. So I think it's worthwhile. Yeah, but I think the fundamental thing: are we actually feeling closer and more connected with others, and are we actually meeting our experience in this kind of way that's unmediated by our ideas? Those two things are basic principles. And I'm looking over my shoulder now to see if there are any other
If
votes.
you're going to be corrected.
Yes, if I'm going to be corrected.
No, Bill, that wasn't it. Well, I wanted to just double up on it because I asked, a teacher too, and it was just, do you find yourself being a kinder person? And don't measure that by each day, but practice for a while. Then look and say, and I can look 5 years ago, 10 years ago and go, yeah, a little better, So that's important, And then that's the method side, as Bill said, and then on in the wisdom side, for me, the measure is then, and it hooks to the kinder person. There's a lot less I that has to be protected and be correct and be right and have control, and so they really hook together because that's the wisdom of the interconnectedness too. Zopa's just not is more permeable, more fluid, more impermanent, more that I understand that. Yeah, it's easier to get along then. I don't have to win. Yeah. And trying things, it's not like, and I know you know this, it's kind of like best to try things modeling on some teacher or some senior student. Like, try those things. Don't go beyond that, I just saw this very funny little clip on somebody sent on YouTube. It was called the Olympics of Meditation. And there were 3 people in a ring, like a boxing ring. Did you see that? Oh God, it was great. And there was one guy, and he's just sitting, not doing anything. He's just sitting there. And then there's a woman, and she's got crystals and bells and all kinds of magical things to help her meditation. And then there was a guy that looked more like a wrestler or something. And they start, and they have the announcer, oh, Carla's losing her power from her crystal. I can tell because she put it down, but she's moving to her triangle, and maybe that'll bring it back up. And it was very funny. And then finally the judges call the time. It's like 1 minute or something. And they talk about who won, and they go interview. And they pick the guy who didn't do anything. And they said, what did you do to win that? And he said, I sat. And it was great because it was like, yep, I sat. So, we just build these habits. Try not to be too smorgasbordy. We all want to take a bite of everything, but it can get way out there.
Anything to add?
I'm trying to think of examples for myself, and they have such a range that
It's a felt sense.
feeling
Yeah.
engaged. I don't know if I want to use the word
Mm-hmm.
but feeling, yeah, engaged. That is the most of the, because there's a, yeah, the interest and the, if it's a searching mind or, so in that sense, trying things in a, with an openness to what you'll find rather than trying to make it into something.
Yeah.
So I feel, yeah, kind of the search and attitude helpful. But because, but it's important to have, and luckily a lot of our practices give us many different angles to work. And so if this one is boring and not connecting with it today, then there's one over here that, I can work with. So there's almost always something that's, provided by the tradition even that is kind of something to hook onto. But still, I think there is an aspect of, sort of expanding on, making the connection with our own experience and context and, yeah, and our personal experience and how does that
Mhm.
tie in with, this activity. And remembering the motivation is key, so is the leading to. But the certain amount, it just, we can't, yeah, we're not being asked to just totally fake everything in terms of, fake practice. So we have to, be there. But I feel like I was thinking of examples where something where I could imagine, for me, there's some sort of mysterious parts of some of our rituals that we might do, which if I were to sort of put a meaning on that I didn't really read anywhere or hear from any teacher, I would feel like asking a teacher about, I see this, when we offer this torma, to these kind of beings, I see it as, a different, some way, something that's, I'd like to, could I use that as a way of whatever? So something like that, I would feel like, yeah, consulting people who really do relate with that part of it. Am I, in the ballpark there? But something that I feel I do get, essentially, because I've had experiences, and they do match up with what's in the teachings in the books that I've read, and I see, okay, I kind of get that, and then it feels like doing the practice this way or with this attitude is furthering something that I already know something about, and feel like I can, I have a experiential understanding of it. Then I can feel like I can decide myself that that's a good, helpful.
Sometimes we can be a bit premature when you're saying there are these pieces. Now, how do I kind of connect this at the felt level? Sometimes we can be kind of premature in making that work, as opposed to just becoming very facile with it and allowing something to work. Our sense of what it looks like if it works, or what it feels like if it works, can cut us off from actually seeing how something actually does open something that we don't know about. That's a tricky process. When Dora mentioned the magic word tormas, which are these very you want to roll your eyes over something, that's a good one to do it. Offering these little dough balls. It's like, what is that about? And then say, oh, okay, well, I'm satisfied by psychological interpretation, so I'm going to make some kind of psychological interpretation about that, and then I'm good to go. Probably have missed the opportunity that's embodied in that. But we collectively, on average, might not have the patience to wait for the 20 years for something like that to open up. And in the meantime, not having the patience, we would become discouraged, and we'd pitch the whole thing in and tell everybody what a bunch of hooey it was, and primarily ourselves, and that would be unfortunate. But in that, it's better to do something else than to sort of prematurely sort of make something work or just flounder around. But they're very personal things. But again, I'd be very, exactly which thing are you talking about? The 6 parts that you get down, and then there's this situation where you're going to do this. The details are actually the thing that really makes something come alive for me. And what is actually, what is it? I think that's where it really becomes. The rest of it, I'm just making up stuff. It's like, generally you say you posed an interesting question, and in my own search for an aesthetically pleasing intellectual world, I come up with something that sounds nice. But was it helpful? I don't know.
Was it even Dharma?
Was it even
I
Dharma?
don't know.
I don't know.
I really like what Zoka said about just seeing what you're noticing in yourself. If you feel like maybe I'm a kinder person than I used to be, or for me, kindness is a big thing to notice or not, but also fixation. To be able to just sort of let go of fixation and just that sense of these are the traps my mind used to involve me in, and I get some relief from that, and I just feel this. And it's like, okay, this practice makes sense to me because I can see myself doing that. And otherwise, it can get very intellectual.
Mm-hmm. And that's experiential.
Yeah.
So that's stress relief. I mean, if we're clear on it.
That kind of yardstick is good, kind of overall. And as you said, it's like look over not from this morning to this afternoon, but
Or even in one moment of just like, here's this thought pattern that I just obsess about and drives me crazy, and it's always like, wow, I just found a way to let go of that. I didn't just be able to let go of that.
Yeah, but that's a yardstick to use over a longer period of time than
Give one time.
I did that meditation for 15 minutes. I don't feel kinder now. But the kind of thing that Sally was bringing up, like more like how am I going to relate to the particulars of this practice? It's a different kind of question. They're all very good questions. So now let's take ourselves and our discussion seriously and dedicate it. Dedicate the merit. By this virtue may I quickly realize Mahamudra and establish all beings without exception in this state. you all.